Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Good afternoon to everybody gathered here at Amaravati and around the country, around the world who are tuning in for this webcast today. I should begin by mentioning that we'll just have one more of these in this format. Next Sunday is the full moon of July. July the 5th is Asala Puja. And so that marks the beginning of the rains retreat. And our custom at Amaravati is during the summer months, from the full moon of July to the full moon of October, every Sunday afternoon we have a public talk. So rather than at the moment inviting anybody and everybody to come to join in with those on a Sunday afternoon here at Amaravati, we'll just use these Sunday afternoon webcasts for that. Those weekly talks, so that from the 13th of July, then we'll begin the talks. They're given themes and titles beforehand, and so it won't be structured in this form of a question and answer that we have been having over these last few months. So next week will be the last opportunity to send in some questions and to have this kind of a dialogue in this way, and then after that, for the next 3 months, we'll have the Sunday talks webcast in this way. So I thought for a theme for this week, one of the things that comes up a lot, particularly with the coronavirus epidemic, and then the widespread, vast numbers of protests around the world, particularly in the United States, but everywhere around the planet, the protests are asking for and demanding racial equality, to have the governments of the world, particularly in the Western world, bringing attention to the inequities in society, but also in countries of Asia, such as in Hong Kong or in India, where we have a very injurious caste system, still has its effect. One of the questions that comes up over and over is about karma and the kind of fatalism or determinism that people can have, or the sort of superstitious relationship to what's known as karma, not just in the Western world, but in so Eastern philosophy and Asian countries, the Eastern world, and there can easily be a sense of things being fixed. So it's my karma, or it had to be this way, it was meant to be this way, and this is how it's supposed to be. Or when things happen to an individual, we have an individual experience, not just getting an illness, but also being oppressed by powerful forces within the society on account of one reason or another, our skin color, the nature of our birth, the family that we've been born into, and such like. There can be this sort of deterministic or fatalistic attitude, or it's my karma, or it's their karma, or as though there was some kind of fixed, rigid structure, a fixed cause and effect structure that was so rigid and unchangeable. So I feel that one of the most helpful things in terms of the Buddha's teaching, and that is really worthy of reflection, is that even though there are strong tendencies to have that idea of fixity, of fate, of a sort of an unavoidable karmic consequences, or that the reason why we experience what we do in this moment is because of some actions in a previous lifetime, the Buddha pointed very clearly to from his own perspective and looking around at the natural world, is that the the effects of our individual actions are only one element that play into what we experience in the present moment. And I feel it's helpful to understand that and the word karma, as it now takes shape in English, it's really a shorthand for kamma, which means action. The Pali word kamma, or even the Sanskrit word karma, just means action. It means doing, deliberate, chosen action, kamma. And vipaka means the result of those actions. So often we use the word karma as a shorthand for kamma vipaka, action and its result. So that's the way I'll be using it, even though I think the Oxford English Dictionary defines karma as some kind of fixed fate or destiny that is unavoidable. So there's two things in this consideration I feel it's really helpful to reflect on and to take to heart. One is that the results of individual action are only one element in making up what we experience in our lives in each moment. But also, most importantly, nothing is fixed. The Buddha spoke of the fact that our choices make a difference, and we can make choices. And if it wasn't possible for the choices to be made, if everything was predetermined, then practicing Dhamma, enlightenment, would be impossible. Liberation would be completely impossible. There would be a fixed system like that. Is not something that could result in liberation from that system. And so the Buddha made it very clear in numbers of teachings that the choices can be made, and those choices make a difference. So firstly, just to briefly speak about the different influences, what we have in the teachings mentioned here and there in various suttas, sort of woven together as a more formalized system in the later commentaries, but these principles pop up in various different forms in different teachings of the Buddha, are what is called the niyama, or the five niyama, which means laws or principles of nature. So this is describing in outline all the different things that go together to make up this moment. So the first is utu niyama. Utu literally means the weather, but it's really the laws of physics and chemistry. So, for example, I experience the force of gravity. I can feel my body being pulled to the surface of the earth. But I feel it. It's experienced here. The sensations of the body having weight are felt here. But I was not involved in creating the force of gravity. I did not decide on. I was not in a discussion that decided upon how one mass would affect another mass, and so on and so forth. The weight of the electron, or how neutrons and protons work together. Those are completely non-personal aspects of the universe. But we experience the result of them. So we experience the way that physics and chemistry work, the laws of nature work in that respect. So then the second one is bija niyama, which is essentially, bija means a seed, so essentially means the laws of biology. So again, I experience the need to breathe. I like oxygen. If I'm alive, and then the body is to stay alive, then oxygen is necessary to keep that life going. It's part of the living system for a human being. So that's how aerobic respiration works. Because there's oxygen in the atmosphere, then certain, varieties of living being depend on that oxygen as a life source, as an energy source, and so aerobic respiration is very much part of all of our lives. Not just for survival, but also mindfulness of breathing. There's a meditation method as well. So that is also a non-personal thing. That the need to breathe, the laws of biology, how we are born, how the body grows up, how we need to eat food, how we get energy from the food that we eat. All of this is part of bija niyama, the laws of biology. Even the way that we work together as a human group, as a social animal, these are all parts of the biological realm. They're not personal. The way we bond with each other, the way we have hierarchies of elder and younger, senior and junior, top dog, bottom dog in a pack of dogs. That's all, I would say, the part of bija niyama, the biological field. So we experience the results of those laws of biology simply by the fact of our birth. The third of the niyamas is karma niyama. So that is the law of cause and effect, of action, deliberate willed action, and the results that come from that action. So this is where the choices that can be made make a difference, and this is where, say, the attention goes in our human life, and where we can most helpfully put most of our attention is onto karma, the actions that we take, the words we choose to say, the things we choose to do, the places we choose to go, how we spend our time. That's all in the realm of karma niyama and the laws of cause and effect. So a huge amount of the Buddha's teaching focuses on exactly that area of making skillful choices and seeing the good results, seeing what happens when unskillful choices are made, and witnessing, acknowledging the results of that. So this is where it seems most personal, and things are very sort of directly felt and have the greatest impact on the citta. But also it's important to see that even the laws of cause and effect, of action and its results, deliberate willed intentional action, and its results are still a part of the natural order. We take those things very personally. We think I choose, I feel, I do, I speak, I remember, and it seems very personal. But a lot of Buddhist meditation, insight meditation in particular, is geared at developing a perspective to see that even that which seems very personal and has our name sort of written deeply, etched very deeply and firmly into particular actions and memories and experiences, that is, in its essence, is an appearance of things. It's not an absolute reality. So the other two niyamas, just to complete the set, are citta niyama, which is essentially the laws of psychology. So, like, again, how the mind works. This is not a personal choice. I was not involved in deciding how memory works or how imagination works or how the mind perceives color, how it uses language, how it stores information, how it cultivates and develops wholesome qualities or unwholesome qualities. The laws of psychology, again, these are things that are experienced, how memory works or memory stops working, how we use language or how our mind interprets sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, the impact of the sensed world. Those are all citta niyama, that just they function according to the laws of psychology, how the mind works, but they're not personal. How that all works, and the process of experiencing in the mental realm. These are not personally created. They're not individual issues. And then lastly, Dhamma niyama, which, as one can tell, it's going from the most sort of particular physical aspect of nature to the most sort of refined and transcendent aspects of nature. So Dhamma niyama is essentially the fabric of reality on the ultimate level, so that beyond even mind and mental activity, how the universe works, how it constitutes the nature of the unconditioned, the unborn, the uncreated, the transcendent attributes of Dhamma itself. These are also non-personal. These are not individually created or so something that is to do with our own choices, but rather it's a part of the fabric of reality. So in this moment, In each moment, all of us experience the results of those 5 principles all working together. So that along with the results of personal choices, or feeling the effects of other people's choices, like say speaking about the oppressive nature of, say, the white male-dominated societies around the world, the choices that have been made in terms of invading and occupying other countries, leeching them of their resources, kidnapping their people, sending them overseas and enslaving people. There's the choices that are made by individuals, and also much more locally, just choosing to sit down by your machine to listen to this Sunday afternoon webcast, myself choosing these words, which words come to mind as being useful and appropriate to convey certain principles, certain aspects of understanding along the whole spectrum. The array of things that we experience in each moment, whether it's aspects of nature, the results of our own choices, the results of other people's choices, in this moment it all arrives here. There's the physical world, the biological world, the psychological world. There's the results of action, our own actions, other people's actions. There's the law of Dhamma, the nature of the conditioned and the unconditioned, and the relationship between those two. It all meets here in this moment. And so that what we can say is, rather than things being predetermined, we can say that everything, this moment, is preconditioned through the coming together of the Big Bang and the physical world, the laws of physics, chemistry, of karma and vipaka, of psychology, and the ultimate reality of things. It all arrives in this moment exactly like this in each of our lives, in each of our minds. So then, in terms of spiritual training, the task is to receive that array of different influences, acknowledging what has come from our own personal choices, and also what has come just from the workings of the natural order, to be able to be open-hearted, to have, in a sense, a radical acceptance, a loving kindness, an open-heartedness to all of that. In this moment, it's exactly like this: the physical world, the biological world, the mental world, the personal world, the transcendent world. It's all meeting together in this moment exactly this way, here, now, for each of us in its own unique fashion. And so part one of practicing Dhamma is having that open-heartedness to receive that whole array of influences. Part two is then what is done with that. And so this is really where the practice of mindfulness and wisdom, satipanya, comes into play. That with a heart open to the way things are, this is the way it is, it's exactly this way in this moment. So, having that receptivity, then the part two of practicing Dhamma is then relating to that array of experiences, or those patterns of experience, bringing mindfulness and wisdom to that. And so that is what guides action. Is there something to be done or not to be done? Is there something to be said or not to be said? What can be done with respect to the way that the universe is, the world is, in this moment, that can lead to the greatest benefit for this being, for other beings, to lead towards what is wholesome and beneficial for society and the living realm, to the extent possible. And so I often like to reflect, this is really the two-part process of practicing Dhamma, receiving the effects of past causes and their kind of indescribably complex and intricate interdependent nature, receiving the effects of past causes like this, and then in this moment planting the causes for skillful effects in the future. And that the way that those skillful causes are planted is essentially through mindfulness and wisdom. And then that is in a way using the qualities of the good heart, of that, letting the Dhamma in a way speak through our actions and our words and our attitudes, so that the more fully the heart, the mind is attuned to Dhamma, to reality, to nature, and the more that quality of mindfulness and wisdom is enabled to function in an unobstructed fashion, then the more these lives of ours can be guided towards being of benefit to ourselves, to others, and that we're going to be, say, naturally inclined towards what is harmless, what is honest, what is noble, what is liberating, what is supportive to the good and to well-being of the living world, to other human beings, the human society, and to the world at large. So those are a few opening reflections on karma and vipaka and how things are the way they are. I'm sure there's a few questions that will arise for that, but you got one more week to come up with your questions, so both local and remote. So please do freely ask if you like. So other questions that have been sent in this week. The print is a bit small this time. So, is there a point in one's practice where the desire to ask questions lessens due to a growing trust and faith in the Buddha Dhamma, i.e., there is just knowing without a need to question as much? I noticed that early on in my own practice the mind was filled with questions, yet now, if a question pops up, there's more of a sense that I already know the answer and don't need to rely on my teachers as much as I used to. It's like I learned from a mechanic how to change the oil in the car, and maybe it's time to trust I can change the oil on my own without relying so much on the mechanic's instruction. Thanks for your thoughts on this tangent, Lungpo. Last question, I promise. Good question, I would say, and what comes to mind in relationship to that is a comment when I was living in Thailand. I couldn't speak very much Thai. It was very poor understanding of the language, and I lived most of my time at Wat Pananachat, which was about 5 miles, about 7 kilometers away from the main monastery where Luang Por Chah lived. But I did have the chance to go and spend a bit of time over there once in a while, and sitting usually under Ajahn Chah's kuti, where he would receive people. It was like a little open area. He would sit on a wicker bench at one end of the area under his kuti, and people would gather around and ask questions, often for hours and hours and hours. And on one occasion, there was one or two other Western monks there who could translate, very helpfully. And on one occasion, after being there for some time, this is as I'm remembering the incident, somebody made the comment to Luang Por Chah, it's amazing, Luang Por, we've been here for 2 or 3 hours, 3 or 4 hours, and no matter how many questions people ask or what all the different things that people are asking about, whether it's problems in the family life, difficulties with money, whether it's people asking meditation questions amongst the nuns or the monks in the Sangha here, you seem to have this way of you open up a conversation and somehow you get the person to answer their own question. How do you do that? And I, of course, not being able to understand Thai, I couldn't really have followed how that dynamic worked myself. But you could see that Luang Por would engage with people and have a conversation with them, and how that kind of dynamic took shape, where the person would, in a way, be led to their own understanding. They'd find themselves sort of coming to a kind of a useful, valid conclusion themselves, and would, thank you, Luang Por. And so rather than him just sort of spelling out an answer, he seemed, and as this person was remarking on, he seemed to be able to help people to answer their own questions. And so this person was saying, how do you do that? That's kind of amazing. Are you sort of reading their minds, or how do you, are you kind of aware that they already know what the answer is, and you're sort of going to give them the clue how to find it? And then Luang Por Chah made this very interesting comment, again, that was translated to me at the time, and he said that if a person didn't already know the answer to the question, they couldn't have asked the question in the first place. So when somebody asks a question, you just have to help them to go back to where the question came from, and that's where they find the answer. And when he said that, you could tell people going, how does that work? But I thought it was very very insightful, very interesting, and also how he'd spent so much time in dialogue with people, and also found out over the years what really helps people. Because if you're just sort of sitting literally on the high seat and you're just delivering answers, it's like an answering machine. Push here and you get your sort of Dhamma response, like talking to Siri on your iPhone. Like, Ajahn Amaro, what's the answer to this Dhamma question? Siri, tell me, what's the meaning of life? Luang Por Chah found that rather than him just spelling things out and explaining what his understanding was, that it really helped an individual far more to sort of discover things for themselves. And also, in that way, they were able to, learn to use their own wisdom and to trust their own wisdom, which I feel is very, very helpful. Yeah. Also, I think just as whoever was asking this question, as he was saying, that it's through the development of Dhamma practice and watching your own mind, that things do become more familiar, and whereas we can easily infantilize ourselves, if that's the right word to use. We can make ourselves weak. Say, I'm just a student. I don't know anything. I'm just, I don't really understand this. I'm not an expert. I haven't read the Pali Canon. I haven't meditated that much. What do I know? Or the Ajahn, the person up in the high seat, the authority, they know everything. So we can in a way hide our own light or ignore our own light. And sort of impart that goodness or wisdom or the source of knowledge and truth somewhere else. Sometimes it can be more comfortable for us to be in a sort of weak, childlike position and put the authority somewhere else. But the whole, not just what Luang Por Chah would do, but also the thrust of the Buddha's teaching is to help us to be a light unto ourselves, to be an island unto ourselves, to be our own authority. And so in the Kalama Sutta, which is probably one of the most significant and influential teachings, particularly in terms of bringing Dhamma to the West and into the realm of skeptical materialism, where in the Kalama Sutta, then the Buddha goes through this village of Kesaputta, and the people there are very keen, dedicated spiritual practitioners, and they asked the Buddha, we're very sincere, we want to practice in a good way and develop our spiritual lives, but all these different yogis come through here, different sannyasins and yogis and gurus, teachers, acharyas, and they all seem to say something different. And each one of them says, I'm right and all the other ones are wrong. So how do we know who to trust? How do we know what's reliable? And then the Buddha gives this very interesting collection of I think 10 criteria. And he says, you shouldn't believe some teaching just because it's handed down to you from your parents or your ancestors. You shouldn't believe it just because it's something that's written in the holy books or it's sort of recited by spiritual from spiritual authorities. You shouldn't believe it just because it's logical or hammered out by deductive or inductive reasoning. You shouldn't believe it just because all the other people around you believe it. But rather, you should listen, take things in, try them out, and then whatever leads to benefit for yourself and for others, then take it and use it. If you see that it leads to harmony between yourself and others, it leads to peace, towards freedom, towards contentment, take it and use it. If you see that by following that it leads to confusion, to alienation, to more anxiety, division, argument, difficulty, then leave it aside. And so that right in that teaching, he's saying, in a sense, one of the very almost unique, say, spiritual teachers or teachers, founders of a world religion that said, "Don't believe me." He said, "Don't believe someone who's in a position of spiritual authority just because they say that." And Luang Por Chah often quoted that very regularly, or when the Buddha was sitting next to Venerable Sariputta giving a Dhamma talk. At the end of the talk, he turned to Sariputta and said, "Sariputta, have you heard me give this teaching before?" And Sariputta said, "Venerable Sir, no, I haven't." And he said, and the Buddha said, "Do you believe that it's true?" And then Sariputta said, "Not yet, Venerable Sir." And the dynamic is that here you have a great spiritual guru and his chief disciple sitting there in front of a whole assembly, and the chief disciple says to the guru, I don't believe you, Venerable Sir. So it can seem like a kind of outrageous, disrespectful, rude way to behave. And then the Buddha goes on to say, well, why is that, Sariputta? And then Sariputta said, well, because I haven't had the chance to test it out and find and see it for myself. And then the Buddha said, good, Sariputta. Well done, this is, Sariputta is wise. And Lumpur Cha quoted that encounter. It's a sort of a blend of a couple of different encounters that you find in the teachings. And Lumpur Cha used to quote that over and over and over, that said, don't believe something just because it's there in the scriptures or coming from an authority or because it makes logical sense or some eloquent pundit, some kind of authoritative speaker puts it into sort of clear, logical words. Don't believe it, but take it, use it, and see for yourself. And then your knowledge is coming from a direct experience. So similarly, with this question about trusting your own knowledge, that yes, I do know how to change the oil in my car. I have watched my mind for the last number of years. I do see how this works. So I would encourage that kind of trusting, having confidence in your own insight, and seeing that as a skillful, a wholesome direction for the practice to take. Because if you're always dependent on the affirmation by an outside source or a teacher saying, well done, you got it right, then we're disempowering our own citta, our own heart, and essentially the purpose of the practice is for the heart, the mind, to wake up to its own reality, and to say trust that source of truth and wisdom is within us, is the very fabric of our own heart, our own mind is the very source of truth and reality, and to use the practice to see that, to know that, and to live from that basis. So, next one. Thank you for the energy, clarity of thought and words when sharing your knowledge and insight in your many Dhamma talks. Listening to them across the Atlantic rejuvenates and inspires my practice. Questions. Being the parent of a toddler, I would like to do what I can to help make the path to liberation more easily accessible, should they choose it. Cognitively, I understand children are unable to process the deeper teachings until they are 7. I would agree. Yeah. Until then, I hope to guide them towards observing the 5 precepts. Good intention. In order to minimize confusion, but given the existence of human agreements, conventions, and their use in navigating this world, is there anything I can do, or refrain from doing, or saying, to make it easier to detangle human conventions from the truth? Is there anything you can suggest I do to encourage pati-pati puja? That's the puja, or the enacting of the practice from a young age. Well, if it's a toddler or toddlers, that's a pretty young age, so that's sort of 1 or 2 years old, or maybe 2 or 3 years old. So even language is not particularly well developed at that age. Generally, I would say that the first thing is to be a good example, and that's really children learn from their parents. Also, I'm not a parent myself of biologically. Spiritually, I am. I've got about 35 or 40 children. Monastically, but biologically I don't have any, and so I don't have a personal experience of bringing up a child, but a couple of things that come to mind. First of all, being a good example. So even for a toddler, who's 1 or 2 years old, they know if you're upset. They're there. They feel it if you're angry. And what do you do if you're upset and you're angry? How do you act on that or speak on that? What do you do with those angry feelings? If you're frustrated, if you are bored, what do you do? How do you act on that? If you are frightened, if you're anxious, what do you do about that? How do you work with that? Because a child, particularly a toddler, they're like a sponge. They're soaking everything up. And so, not to be too intimidating, but they learn from everything you do and how you are. And so that Just this morning, somebody sent me a link to a new documentary about His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And it was very interesting because he said that his first spiritual influence in many, many ways was his mother, and his mother as a model of kindness and generosity. And several times during this documentary, he mentions her and speaks very directly and sort of quite warmly and with great gratitude and appreciation how powerfully his mother influenced him. And so I feel that I don't know whether this is a mother or a father speaking, either way, or or a gender non-specific parent, but whatever one's whether you're a mother, father, or anything, any other way of defining it, if you're responsible for bringing up a child, then the way you are and the way you relate, particularly to difficult mind states, is going to have an enormous impact. So children learn by example. So if they know something painful has happened, or they see that you've hurt yourself, or something is difficult, if they see and they can feel and know, they can smell how you handle that, what do you do with those upset feelings? If you're feeling impatient and frustrated, what do you do with that? And so that and it's not always the case you're going to act in a perfect way. So that I feel one of the most beautiful things that can be done is if, say, there are moments where you are impatient with the child, you have an outburst, or like, I've told you already, leave that alone. If you recognize I really lost it there, she's only 2, and even though I told her please don't touch that, that was actually 5 hours ago. So why should she remember? Half a day has gone by, and for a 2-year-old, that's an ocean of time. So if you make a mistake like that, then to apologize and say, I'm terribly sorry. I just shouted at you. That was really cruel, unkind, and I feel really bad about having shouted at you. And so please accept my apology. And so that kind of humility and closeness can, in terms of not trying to always be perfect or always be right, but to be able to acknowledge your own shortcomings is very important. Again, I'm not a parent of any children, at least in this lifetime. But also, I feel one of the things that is very significant in families, and I think is lost a lot in the West, is physical contact between the parents and the children. Just the kind of amount of time that a parent is physically together with the child, or in physical contact with their own children. I think it makes I feel, in my experiences, it makes a huge difference. And in the West, often there's a sort of physical remoteness, and people are using sort of devices and structures and things for the child to be entertained or looked after, but the ordinary physical contact between the child and the parents is an important thing, to give those signals of the parent, because as the Buddha put it, your parents, they are the model they're the early deities. They model the Dhamma, really. They're present, they're reliable, they're the source of goodness, they're the source of food, source of comfort, protection. So the parents, or the parent, is a model for Dhamma, for that quality of protection and support. And so that physical contact is, and for the child to be able to feel you, to smell you, to be having that kind of closeness, it can be giving that, yes, there is that which in the universe which is reliable, that which is good, that which is a support. And then as the child grows up, then that gets transferred from the parent to spiritual qualities, hopefully, eventually. And so they realize that the parents are fallible, but the Dhamma is not. Nature is infallible. The laws of reality are infallible, although Dad and Mom might have more limitations. But that kind of modeling of Dhamma for a parent and being there. I remember when I was before I was in Thailand, when I was first traveling in Southeast Asia, I spent a bit of time in Bali, and one of the very interesting local, not really a custom, it's sort of a familial practice, is that the child doesn't set foot on the ground for the whole first year of their life. So they're carried, they're on the body of one of the parents, or auntie, uncle, sister, brother, somebody, but the child's foot doesn't touch the ground until they're 1 year old. I don't know if that still carries on, but I was really interested in this. And they have a ceremony on the child's first birthday. The first time the child actually touches the earth, they puts their foot on the ground. And I'm not recommending that as a... How am I supposed to do that, Ajahn? You don't know my kids. They love to crawl and climb. They're only 6 months old. So I'm not recommending this or this should be adopted as a practice. But I felt it was very interesting to hear that had evolved, and that sense of being on the mother or on a protective presence, not literally not touching the ground for a year, and then okay, now you're ready for the world, and having a special ceremony. In Bali they have lots of ceremonies, all kinds of different pujas. But I thought that was probably, in my guesswork, would be based on seeing the wholesome effect of and the quality of security and psychological well-being that comes from that sense of, yes, you are looked after, you are protected, you are fed, you are loved, you are cared for. And so then that provides an extraordinary ground of confidence, of ease and trust. And listening to His Holiness the Dalai Lama this morning, watching the documentary about him, there were three things that he spoke about that he got from being so close to his mother and being very impressed by his mother and by the family and growing in his childhood, growing up, and those were trust, honesty, and love. So the degree to which the child sees that, feels that, knows that being manifested by the parent, they can trust the parent is honest, and the parent loves them, then that provides an extraordinary sort of powerful basis for psychological well-being. Whether you introduce things like the Tooth Fairy or Father Christmas, I don't know what country you're writing from or what your local customs might be, I leave that up to individual parents to bring into the picture, whether they have to then, at a certain point, let the child realize that the Tooth Fairy is actually mum or dad, or that the Father Christmas is being channeled by their parents, but not actually appearing down a chimney. And so I leave that for individual families to work out. So the second question was stream entry. How does one know that one is a stream entrant if this was something realized in a previous lifetime, given that enlightenment is reached within 7 lifetimes? Is it an innate sense of knowing which leads such persons towards the path of practice, seeking the teaching, even if born to a very different culture where no religion is practiced, a religion other than Buddhism is practiced? I think I responded to this almost identical question a week or two ago, so maybe you weren't listening then, or maybe you were. Maybe you're the same person, and you just wanted me to talk about it some more. But I would say, essentially, it's if that has occurred, if this is the kind of problem that you have, I think, well, sadhu is a good problem to have. But I would say that that kind of natural virtue, so that if a child who, if they are with their friends and their friends are sort of have caught an animal, they've trapped a bird or something, and they want to torture it, someone who's already realized stream entry in a previous lifetime, they would be recoiling from that. They go, how can you do that? Don't do that. Stop that. That's horrible. That's a terrible thing to do. And or if they got drawn into joining in with that, it would be really painful and hard to remember. Like, oh, how could I have done that? That was awful. That's so sorry. I feel so sorry. So a natural sense of virtue, a kind of a love of goodness and kindness. Also, I think the kind of when there would be a coming into contact with certain principles of Dhamma, again, even if it wasn't put into Dhamma language, it was not represented in Buddhist terminology, or just put into other religious terms or psychological or philosophical terms, that it would the basic principles of Dhamma would immediately make sense. Like, oh, that's right, that's true. Like I wouldn't make any sort of assumptions, but Lumpur Sumedho often has described how when he was in the US Navy, which I think everyone would agree is unlikely to be a very supportive spiritual environment. Maybe US Navy chaplains will object, so please excuse me if I'm being rude to the US Navy spiritual services. But in the 1950s, when he was in the US Navy, he was given a copy of a book of D.T. Suzuki's writings, and he often mentioned in Dhamma talks how he just read the first couple of paragraphs of this D.T. Suzuki book about Zen Buddhism, and he just suddenly realized, I'm a Buddhist. Oh, I'm a Buddhist. It was immediately clear to him. He'd had no contact with Buddhism before. He was quite a devout Christian when he was growing up. He even thought of becoming a Christian minister in the Episcopalian church in Seattle. I think he even had a meeting with a bishop to talk about possibly going into a Christian seminary, but had too many doubts. But then reading D.T. Suzuki there, in his role in the U.S. Navy as a medic, just 2 paragraphs, and I'm a Buddhist. Oh, right, that makes sense. So that kind of immediate affinity with Dhamma teachings, I would say, would be part of it. So that kind of recognition. So both in the sense of feeling at home with particular terminology or ideas, and then I would say particularly virtue. That if you do something harmful or you're around people acting in cruel or dishonest or destructive ways, something in the heart recoils from that. So the Buddha used the image like if an animal, of a sinew from an animal falls into a fire, as it falls into the flame, it curls up and retreats from the flame. He said in exactly the same way the heart recoils from unskillfulness. It just naturally withdraws, and that innate, what they call hiriyottapa, or moral sensitivity, causes that sense of, I can't bear that. I don't want to be near that. That's so painful, so awful. Why would people want to do that? So without any kind of necessarily having a sort of structure around it or a kind of philosophy to back it up, there might be that natural sense. And so and similar to the Dalai Lama, going back to that previous question of yours, that I found my own mother was my first spiritual teacher and exemplar, and in exactly that kind of way, that she was a farmer, but she physically could not cause harm to any other living being, which made it very difficult to be a farmer. I think it's probably one of the reasons why she married my dad, was that. But trying to be a farmer that never takes life or looks after the well-being of every animal on the farm, it was a lot of work and a lot of creatures she was looking after. But that's kind of it was interesting hearing His Holiness speaking, because it's just so like my own mother, that was endlessly helping everybody around, very unselfish and incredibly kind and caring and thoughtful in many, many ways. Never worried about herself, but was always trying to help others, and incredibly reliable and noble-hearted. So that when I was growing up, one of the things ever since I was a small child, if she ever saw me doing anything around the farm that was maybe harmful to another creature, or that she or the other local kids were doing, she would say, you're absolutely, you can't do that. You can't. If they want to go out and shoot with their guns, you can't go with them, or you're not allowed to shoot anything, not allowed to kill anything. And so that when it was really coming from her heart. Like, you shouldn't do that. It's terrible. Just don't do that. Don't do that. Because she really felt that sense of empathy with other living beings, and so I felt very blessed to have that kind of inheritance from her, also of a great respect for other living beings, and the kind of nurturing principle. Even just before she died, that she literally was in the process of dying, and I think it was about less than a month before she died. She was sort of laid up. She had cancer of the pancreas. And it was in the middle of the summer. It was this kind of season, June, July, and there was a sudden rainstorm in the night, and there hadn't been rain for quite a while. And so she's lying there in the middle of the night. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning, and she suddenly realized that with this rain would be bringing on all the snails would come and start eating all her favorite plants. So she literally sort of climbs out of her bed with, she's got less than a month to live, climbs out of her bed, so puts on a raincoat, goes out into the middle of the storm and is picking snails off her babies in the garden, and not, she wouldn't kill them. She would just invite them to go and live over the other side of the fence. And so that was a kind of character that wonderful example of caring, thoughtfulness. That in the middle of the night she's dying of cancer, but she's still, oh, my plants, oh dear, the snails are going to get them. Come on, have that. And she's out in a rainstorm in a nightie and a raincoat in the middle of the night. She was blind; she couldn't see, so she's in the dark. Nighttime, where she's got macular degeneration, so she couldn't see. So she's trying to find the snails with her bright torchlight in the middle of the night in a rainstorm. Wouldn't stop her. She wouldn't sort of think, this is really stupid. I can't see what I'm doing. But just that urge to prevent the precious plants being eaten up, she would motivate her. So I feel that that kind of love of the good, that kind of cherishing life, and the profound respectfulness, not coming from a place of theory, but really coming from the heart, is the kind of qualities that will be there in someone who's spiritually evolved. Okay, next one. Are there any tips and tricks monastics use when practicing how to stay mindful, present all the time? Is that possible? I'm a pretty calm person and can deal well with the challenges of life, but not all the time. How do I practice with the things that still trigger me? I would appreciate your advice. Best. Well, the first thing I would say is it kind of depends on what triggers you. Are you an intellectual? Are you a cook? Are you a dancer? Are you a parent? Are you a school student? Are you in a retirement home? Are you a scientist? Are you a musician? We all get stuck in different ways on different things. We get carried away. So somebody who's an academic, where they get lost might be when they see somebody has published a paper on their own theme and has said something completely wrong and deceptive, or they've stolen your idea, and you might get really lost in that. Someone who's a cook has no interest in academic publications, but they really care about food and recipes and such like. So first thing is to see where we get lost, and to see the results of getting lost, and that sense of the kind of non-personal appreciation of the painful results of attachment. So I often talk about this in terms of trying to make it as wordless as possible, so that you get lost in something, you get carried away, you get caught up, and then when you get caught up, you get carried away, you get really angry because someone's stolen your idea in the publication, or that you were trying to get the souffle right and it's collapsed again because of that damn oven. And so you get upset, you get angry. So then if we are not handling that skillfully, then we'll take it very personally. I'm an angry person, I'm so stupid, it's only food, it's only a publication, or whatever the domain might be. And then we go into self-hatred, or say, okay, in the future, I'm never going to do that again. I absolutely swear, I'm going to have this sort of reinvigorate my spiritual life, and I'm absolutely determined I'm never going to do that again. It's a real problem, and I've got to get rid of it. And if I can get rid of it, then everything will be fine. So these are ways that, with a good intention, we make it personal. It's my problem that I'm guilty of. I cause all kinds of trouble to myself and other people because of this. So the more that, even if it's well-intentioned, the more we make it me and mine, and I have got this real problem, or I get lost with this real thing, then that reifying compounds, that making it real and making it personal compounds the dukkha, the suffering and the alienation, the stress that comes from it. So the most helpful thing is to develop what's called hiriyottapa, or moral sensitivity, and to let that be as wordless as possible, so that when you've got lost in some kind of state, you got excited about something, you got irritated or worried, to look at that feeling, that having lost it, and trimming away all of the self-creation around it, and to say, okay, how does it feel having got lost in that excitement or that fear or that aversion? How does this feel? And the more there can just be a wordless ow, ow, and just leave it at that, just feeling the painfulness of having got lost. That has the most profound and direct effect, at least I find. It's not complicated by all that self-creation around it. It's just the painful results of having followed that. They speak for themselves. It's a non-verbal language. And so one of the teachings that Luang Por Chah often would give is to say, until you really know the pain of attachment, you won't let go. And so that having the presence of mind to recognize when we've got lost, wherever it is that we get lost, to notice that, and when the mind does get stuck in that, to let that to be as fully and completely be felt, to let it be really known, sort of in a bone-deep way, like, ow. And then you don't even have to say, why do I want to do this to myself? Or why do I keep doing this to myself? Why do I keep crashing the same car, as David Bowie put it, I think? Why do we keep crashing in the same car? You don't even have to think that, because the painfulness is what teaches. That's how we learn. It's like if you put your hand in a flame, that you don't have to say, oh, that's hot. You can add the words, but you've already felt it and your hand is withdrawn. So that's one thing. Another way of sustaining mindfulness is just the four foundations of mindfulness themselves, but and particularly developing mindfulness of the body, because that's also more of a wordless language, whereby if you are excited or you are, then the mind is entranced by something that we want to look at, or we want to taste, or we want to hear. And then if we develop mindfulness of the body, then even when the mind says, oh, this is good, I want more of it, if you bring attention into the body, there can be the recognition of, oh, this is quite uncomfortable, or like, oh, I can hardly breathe here, or oh, this is quite hard work. And so that helps to balance things out. Similarly, to give a counterpoint to the thing that you're worried about, or you're excited about, or you're angry about, or you're possessive of, that the just feeling and knowing the somatic quality, the felt sense of that engagement, that helps to, and often the stressfulness, even of something that's called pleasant, being really lost in a pleasant object, just to bring the attention into the body, it kind of spoils the whole chemistry. It's like, wow, this is hard work, or oh, this is quite painful, or this is really uncomfortable, and that can help to balance things out. Similarly, if we get angry or really upset, just feeling how that anger sits in the body and recognizing, oh, this this is tense, this is tight, this is really hot, heavy, and this is painful. Why do I? And again, we don't have to think, why do I want to do this to myself? But just acknowledging that the stressing in the body helps it to let go. And then the last thing I would say is making a project out of it. So, if there's a particular area where you see that you get lost, then to make a project of it. So, okay, for this month or this 6 months or this year, I see I have a strong habit of following this desire, this kind of addiction to this pleasant experience. I call it pleasant. Or I get really angry with my neighbors, and I'm always complaining about my neighbors, or I'm worrying about things. I'm always worried. So make a project of it. So, okay, this is a complaining habit, or this desire habit, or this worrying habit, and so to make a kind of demarcation, to establish a demarcation and say, okay, this is my project for this month or this year. I really want to look at this habit. So in the morning sitting every day, to make a clear and conscious resolution, an adhitthana. So, okay, during today, whenever the mind moves towards this desire object, or moves towards this aversion, this complaining, this worry, then I'll consciously notice that. Be aware of the mind going in that direction, feel the aspects of it in the body, and to be aware of that, and to let the body respond with relaxing, with letting go. And it takes a little while to get into the program, but after a time it can be extremely helpful. To say, okay, well, there's all sorts of other things to be paying attention to, or kinds of practice to develop, but I'm just going to make this my kind of my theme for this period of time. And so that conscious flagging, kind of whenever those states arise, that can also have a very, very helpful effect. Next one. Dear Ajahn Amaro, a question for your Sunday Q&A. How can I be sure that Buddhism isn't just another ism, and that talk of it being otherwise isn't just rhetoric? Many thanks. So many years ago, when I lived here in the 80s and 90s, there was an invitation to a local grammar school, Watford Boys Grammar School, and Ajahn Sucitto was living here at the time. So he was invited to give a talk, and I went along with him to this boys' school. And so we got out of the vehicle and we were ushered straight into the assembly hall. And there's about 700 boys in their school uniforms. So we just sort of saunter out onto the stage and get ourselves settled down. And then this very confident young lad strides up and says, "What is Buddhism?" And this is one of those moments where I felt deep admiration for Ajahn Sucitto and his wisdom, because without missing a beat, he said, "Buddhism is a word. It's a word made up of two parts, Bud and ism." The Bud means awake, that which is aware, and that is the real heart of the religion. The ism is everything else around it. The customs, the traditions, the robes, the stories, the scriptures, and such like. And I was, it was a long time ago, it was probably about 1990, so 30 years ago. But I was so impressed with his kind of, well, not just his quickness of thinking, but also the beautifully appropriate answer. Because with religions, the attention tends to go to the ism. And that's all of the language, the customs, the robes, the forms, the structures that go with it. But without the Bud, then the ism is empty, just as with any other kind of religious form, or any sort of, say, kind of belief system of any sort, whether it's secular or religious. And so in response to this question, how can you be sure? Well, that's up to you. But the more that the attention is focused on the Bud, being awake in this moment, say, knowing that in this very moment, listening to this webcast on a Sunday afternoon here in the UK, that this is an array of perceptions, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, arising, passing away, that is known in this moment. The mind, the heart can be awake to that field of experiencing. And the more that the kind of embodiment of that awake, aware quality is actualized, then the more there is the genuine religious, spiritual process. That's the heart of the religion. That is established. And the ism is all the kind of things that support that, like sitting here in this temple. This temple is a part of the ism. Amaravati, this chair, there's these robes, my role as a monk, that's all part of the ism. But the more that we learn to use and embody and to actualize that quality of being awake, then its value speaks for itself. It's it can be verified. The value of the teaching or the value of being awake can be verified, like as I was saying about the Kalama Sutta earlier on this afternoon. A couple of days ago, I was talking about how again about religious tradition and attachment and reliance on teachers. And in many of his Dhamma talks, Ajahn Amaro would say how when he was a young bhikkhu, a young monk at Wat Pah Pong with Ajahn Chah, he would sort of test himself. He said, "Well, I really like being a monk and I like practicing, but am I dependent? I love Ajahn Chah. I think he's the greatest. He's the wisest person in the world. And am I just attached to him? How well grounded in the practice am I? Where does my faith, my confidence really lie?" And he's often mentioned how he did this thought experiment with himself, and he said, "Okay, so if Ajahn Chah announced to the Sangha one day, I'm fed up with monastic life and I'm going to get married to this 16-year-old girl from the village, and I'm going to be taking off, have a nice life," what would that do to my mind? If Ajahn Buddhadasa made an announcement, Buddhism is a farce, Christianity is the way, Jesus is my Lord and Saviour, and so I'm going to go and be a Christian, what would that do to my mind? If the Dalai Lama joined the Communist Party and gave up on Buddhism, said, dialectical socialism is the way, and the kind of the history and the knowledge of Buddhism is all a waste of time, what would I do? What would that do to my mind? All my spiritual heroes, if they all bailed out in those various different ways. And he said when he did that experiment, he brought those concepts to mind, he realized, well, I would just put my robes on, go out on alms round in the morning, practice meditation, sit, walk, sweep leaves, carry water. What else is there to do? I would just carry on with the practice because I know it has value for myself. So it's not whatever these other people do, it's their business. But I see that it has values for my own direct knowledge. And the way that Luang Por Sumedho describes it, it was almost like he was kind of surprised at his own confidence. Oh, well, that's good. Kind of pleased to discover that he wasn't as dependent on Luang Por Chah as he thought he was. But it was also that, he'd seen how the practice works for himself. And a number of years ago, when I was living here in the 80s and early 90s, I remember him giving a Dhamma talk. This was before the temple was built. It was over in the Sala. One day he was giving a Dhamma talk, and he said, if it was discovered beyond a shadow of a doubt that Buddhism was completely made up by a Hungarian shaman in the 14th century, and the whole thing was a total fraud, and that this guy in Hungary had somehow managed to write all the Buddhist scriptures and sprinkle them over Asia so that later explorers and colonials would discover them, and the whole thing was just a fix-up. Still, even if he'd invented the Four Noble Truths on a sort of a drunk night out with his mates, and yet, if that was the case, would that negate the value of the Four Noble Truths as I have experienced them, as I've worked with them? And, Lumpur Sumedho can be very imaginative, so we were all sitting there thinking, oh, like a Hungarian shaman in the 14th century, okay, wonder where that came from. But he could very easily go into these wonderful imaginative riffs. But he said, so even if it was made up and it was all a fraud, does the fact, even though it might have begun as a fraud and made up in the Middle Ages, does that negate the fact that the Four Noble Truths has been valuable and has produced insight and genuine realizations of truth in this life, in this mind? And he said, well, when he would think things through in that way, or explore it in that way, he said, yeah, wherever it came from, I don't care, because these teachings work, they have value. So it doesn't depend on the reliability of the Pali Canon, or doesn't depend on these particular words or kind of forms of expression. But by taking these principles and applying them, you can know directly through this life, this mind, that these have a worth, have a value. So that's what the Buddha called being independent of others in this Dhamma and discipline, in this sasana, in this training. So that if one wants to be sure, you want to be sure about the Buddha, rather than always satisfactory, that any sankhara, sabbe sankhara dukkha, all conditioned things, all conventions and constructions are necessarily unsatisfactory. They're incomplete or inconsistent. They're sankharas, they're in a constant state of change. They can't permanently satisfy. Sabbe sankhara dukkha. All sankharas, all compounded things are unsatisfactory. That's their nature. So we're not looking for satisfaction in that which can't satisfy. You're not looking for completion in the world of sankharas. But the kind of amazing and miraculous thing about, say, the teaching of the Four Noble Truths is that the words of the Four Noble Truths are sankharas, they're formations. But applied in a skillful way, then they can bring about the realization, the direct knowing and embodying of the asankata, the unconditioned, the unformed, the uncreated. And that's the kind of miracle of instruction, is that even though the words and the forms are limited, dependent, contingent, and so conditionally, created, they can, if they're applied in a skillful way, they can lead to that direct embodiment and realization of the uncreated. So a couple more. Ajahn Amaro, hello and thanks for the teachings which I have returned to during lockdown. I recently heard a talk in which you shared your experience with intoxication, booze, as a 20-something. I have had a long relationship with seeking escape from uncomfortable thoughts into sense pleasure. I stopped drinking for over 10 years and began exploring Buddhist ideas, meditation, and retreats. But, ! I think I was born angry! Eventually I drank again for relief. I've been in this start-stop situation for 6 years, and it's becoming quite a long road at 58. Question is possibly, how can I make friends with my cynical and mistrusting disposition when it rears its ugly head, to allow me to settle in life and be more useful to myself and others? How can I make friends with my cynical and mistrusting disposition when it rears its ugly head, to allow me to settle in life and be more useful to myself and others? Well, a good question. I feel very sympathetic, empathetic for how things are. One of the reasons why I was very happy to be in a monastery was I knew that I couldn't be tempted to drink anymore. Since I'd gone sober at my 21st birthday, and I entered the monastery about 4 months later. And so I felt, okay, this is good people to be with. I'm the kind of personality, I'm very affected by the kind of people that I'm with, so if I'm around a lot of drinkers and party animals, then I would be drinking and partying. So moving in with a bunch of Buddhist monks was a really good way to make sure I was not putting myself in harm's way or not putting temptation in my path. And I make no secret about that I feel that was extremely grateful. I was extremely fortunate that I came across the monastic tradition at that time. I think maybe going back to that a comment I made to one of the previous questions, say, to be more of a friend to your, make friends with my cynical and mistrusting disposition, that quality of open-heartedness. And so when there's that urge to escape, to want to switch off or to forget, to get away from it, to try, as to the extent possible, to open the heart to those sort of frustrated, insecure, cynical, as you call it, teachings. Not to pretend that they're not there, but to make friends. To not try and make yourself like the unlikable or make excuses for it, but just to have that open-heartedness that recognizes, here it is. Ow! Here's that urge again, this ugly, restless, kind of destructive feelings. Here they are. It's like this, and to the degree to which one can have metta, like a real radical acceptance of those feelings, and to not react against them, not just to run away and switch off. And so that part of it, what I was saying earlier about recognizing the pain of attachment, just, yes, this is painful, but what's the result of trying to switch off? Or I know where this went to the last 150 times, so let's remembering where that went to, and not just as a concept, but in a way that the body memory, and that's why I was saying how it's so much more helpful just to let it be a wordless recognition of the pain that comes from following those impulses. Not to say I'm a terrible person, I went out and got drunk again, I am really useless, I can never get away from this. To leave the verbiage aside and just to let the painfulness of having got lost speak for itself. And the other part of it, which is a major aspect of AA and 12-step programs, is friendship. Draw close, even through a Zoom, draw as close as you can through social distancing to good people. And like I said, I was very happy to move into a monastery where no one's drinking any alcohol, and there's no drug taking, and there's not even any supper. So it was great environment, really simple, harmless environment to be in. So to the extent possible, draw close to people who've stopped drinking. Join a 12-step program, or draw close to people in AA, kind of sign up. And don't be shy with those kind of things, because companionship is really good companionship is the primary way that ignorance is deprived of its fuel. It's the way we put the odds in our favor, as it were. Like in the Mangala Sutta, when the Buddha describes the highest blessings, this long list of blessings that he goes through. The first of the blessings are asevana cha balanang panditanang cha sevana, not to associate with fools, but to associate with the wise. This is the highest blessing. So, to the degree possible, drawing away from people who like to drink, and draw close to people who've stopped drinking. Just to the degree we can make choices, make those choices, and to set things in place that are going to be making things easier for you, as it is said. If you go to the pub, sooner or later you're going to have a drink. It's like, but if you go to the beach, sooner or later you're going to get sand between your toes. It's like that's the nature of the beach. If you are around people who like to drink, sooner or later you're going to start drinking. So try to associate with people who stop that, who are trying to, and particularly in organizations like AA or 12-step programs, that people who have the same intention or the same aspiration to draw away from that, and then also, in those times where you have restrained yourself and you haven't followed those impulses, the other part of it is to consciously recognize how good it feels. And for myself, I've used this a lot to say, this particular destructive or selfish impulse that hasn't been followed for the last month or 6 months. How does that feel? Just look in your heart, not to be proud or conceited, but to recognize, that's great, I feel good. Wow, look, nothing to regret. Yes, that tastes good. It's like fresh air, or nice, cool, clean water when you're thirsty. Oh, yeah, good. This tastes good. So sometimes we can get so focused on the problem and the painful aspects of the problem, we don't notice the alternative. And just to acknowledge, okay, this is what it feels like to not be pulled by that, to be having a mind that has no interest in distracting itself in that way. How does this feel? Oh, again, not to be making a lot of verbiage around it or getting lost in words and ideas, but just to feel the nature of the citta when it's free of addiction, it's free of those compulsions. How does it feel? And just letting that quiet, spacious, bright normality speak for itself. And the last one. Dear Ajahn Amaro, if you don't mind a personal question, after all these years as a monk, what keeps you going? Is it the love for the teaching, or the desire for enlightenment, the support of the Sangha, all of the above? And how do you manage those times when there is no energy, will or faith to keep going? It's an interesting question because I never think of it in those terms, because I saw this question earlier on today and I thought, well, it's rather like going out to I'm not trying to make any claims or anything, but rather like going out to the sky and saying, how do you keep going? Or talking to the rain saying, how do you keep raining? It's like, I don't really see any alternative to practicing Dhamma, because what else is there to do? It's like, where can you go, really? What else is there to do? My career of heavy drinking up to the age of 20 was trying to switch it off. And I often mention how I had an epiphany here in Hemel Hempstead. I was at a friend's 21st birthday party, and she was at drama school and was very much in the sort of theatre and decorative performing arts world, but she was also a non-drinker, never used drugs or alcohol. So she had this 21st birthday party, and she got some drinks in for those people who were coming to the party who were drinkers and consumers. But she herself and most of her friends were just sort of into music and dancing and such like. So. So I arrived, and then had my first thought was, lots for me. And I was about 20, so it was before my own 21st birthday party. So I adopted this bottle of, and this isn't an advert, but it was Teacher's Highland Cream, a full bottle of scotch. And during the course of this evening, I drank most of it. There was about an inch or an inch and a half from the bottom of this bottle of scotch. And I realized I still don't feel good. I was kind of fuzzy, but a pint of scotch will do that to you. But I was a pretty serious drinker, so even having consumed a pint of scotch, I wasn't sort of falling over drunk. I was just sort of a bit blurry. But it hadn't got me to that good place where everything feels great. I was still me, and my anxieties and my feelings of alienation and insecurity. And I was sitting there, and I looked at the little bit of scotch in the bottom of the bottle, and I thought, this is a waste of good scotch. Yeah, I've drunk a pint of this stuff, and I'm still not there. Still, it doesn't make any difference. I can't drink enough to get to that place where everything feels good anymore. It doesn't. The medicine doesn't work anymore. I've just become inured to it, and so that in a way it was like that was where I kind of gave up on the idea of not keeping going, if that makes sense. I don't see practicing Dhamma or meditating or being a monk as a sort of a job or a task or a thing that you can really move away from, because reality still is what it is. You can try and distract yourself, but it's basically unavoidable, like gravity or the sun and the moon. It's like it keeps on going. Nature keeps on going. It's whether you like it or not. But I appreciate that not everybody else thinks this way. And but this kind of, when I first went into the monastery, this kind of hit me. and that I was basically you couldn't avoid reality, and so the thing to do was rather than trying to switch off or distract yourself was to face it, to face towards it, to open the heart to it, and see that was, and to realize, to know that in truth that was the way to happiness and freedom. And so I had been considering these issues a lot, and I remember in the first few weeks I was at Wat Nanachat, there was two novices there, two young Thai novices, Boom and Bam, and Bam was a very kind of innocent, completely sort of gentle, open-hearted, sweet kid. They were both teenagers, but Boom was a bit more of a hard case who'd been sort of sent to the monastery by his parents because he was a bit difficult to deal with at home. And Boom had a little bit of English. Bam didn't have any at all. And then one day, because I was an anagarika at that time, and one day novice Boom turned to me and said, and I think he was quoting the song by the Animals. He said, "I've got to get out of this place." So it was interesting he'd learned that much English. I've got to get out of this place. And in all sincerity, I looked at him and I said, "Where can you go? Where is there to go?" Because for me, even though I was only a few weeks in the monastery, it was like nobody can really go anywhere because you're always here. Your mind is always where you are. So you can change the backdrop. You can have a beach or a city or a Europe or Thailand, but really you can't go anywhere. And he gave me this look like, "You Farangs are nuts." You can go to Bangkok, you can go to Sisaket, you can go to anywhere but here. Anywhere but Wat Nanachat. But to me, that was kind of like the mind is where we live. You can't get away from it. You can fill it with objects to create a bit more distraction, but you can't really get away from it because you are it. It's like trying to get away from your own shadow. It's like no matter how hard you run, it'll always be right there at your feet, as long as there's a light source. So I'm not meaning to be disrespectful of your question, but I feel it's in a way, what else is there to do? How can it's like when people say, "Oh, I really like being in nature," the thing that comes to mind is, well, where else could you be? How could you get away from nature? You are nature. What aspect of your body and mind is not part of nature? Well, and what they mean is, I like to be away from human constructions and in amongst the trees and such like. And part of me knows that, but also part of the mind is say, well, how can you not be connected to nature? You are nature. Every aspect of your being is part of the natural order. You can't get away from it. So, in terms of Dhamma practice, or what we call practicing, is to being more and more aware of the fact that you are nature. You are that, and that the adherence to me and my personality, my life, my choices, is just a sort of superficial seeming, and that it can look like that. But in a way, it's rather like saying a wave saying to another wave, "I'm fed up with the sea. I'm going somewhere else." Like, where can you go? You are the sea. It's like, it's not really up for discussion, if that makes sense. And so that I don't really see it in terms of keeping going. And that certainly I'm the abbot of a monastery, and I follow the discipline and the routines and such like, and it can look as though I am running a thing or making choices to stay with this, but internally, to be honest, I don't see it that way. I don't think of it as a sort of keeping going, or that there's any alternative. It's like the earth keeps turning, the natural order keeps functioning. Where is there to go? What else is there to do apart from embody that reality? And that in a way, what we call practicing Dhamma is surrendering self-view, surrendering self-concern, and more completely embodying the fact that the mind is Dhamma, the mind is nature, the body is nature. This is it's never been anything other than that. So it's in a way the wave waking up to the fact that it's always just part of the sea and was always in a state of transformation, and that the impression of individuality and making personal choices, and those being somehow absolutely distinct from other things, other people. It was just an appearance, just a seeming, just a surface, a superficial view. So I will leave it there for this week, and once again to remind people that next Sunday will be the last of the Q&A sessions. I'm not inviting a whole flood of extra questions, so don't feel compelled, but that'll be also Asala Puja, the full moon day of July this year, and so it'll be just the beginning of the Rains Retreat, and that starts from the day after for the next 3 months, and we'll have the Sunday afternoon themed talks from that time on.